Jean Arnault, how are you, sir?
Very good. How about you? Nice to see you.
It's an absolute pleasure to see you as well. Geneva Watches is pretty damn cool.
I mean, it's sunny outside. Quite enjoyable for sure.
Indeed, indeed. I want to talk to you about your official capacity in Louis Vuitton. The first thing I want to talk about, if you don't mind, was we met each other very unconventionally. And I have to say that, and I want to say this later in the symposium as well, I was really impressed by your humility, your kind of elegance, even before I actually met you.
Thank you very much.
And I think that really characterizes you as a person, as I've come to discover. But it was really funny because I was launching one of my first special editions. It was a
I remember that, yes.
Yes, Tag Heuer Carrera Blue Dreamer, right? Modeled after kind of a skipper. And I remember I received an email, and it was just like, "Hi, how are you?
I forgot about that.
My name is Jean. I really like your watch. Would it be possible for me to purchase one for myself and for my brother, right?" And then I looked at the bottom of the thing, and it said Jean Arnault, right? And I was convinced that it was a practical joke. Like I thought, like the guys from Hodonki or something like that got my email address, and then we're doing this just to see what I would do. Then I was like, I shall ask my friend Catherine, who was at the time working at Tag Heuer, and she said, I think that might be serious. And then so, of course, I responded, yeah, dude, it's a pleasure. Not only a pleasure, it's an honor. But then we just started talking about watches. And I remember we ended up meeting for the first time in Paris, and I was like, dude, you know so much about watches, right? So how did you get into it?
I mean, I've obviously been exposed to the practice for a couple, ever since I was born, because it being part of the group. But the same way I was exposed to, like, say, perfume cosmetics and leather goods and things like that. It was never really a true passion of mine until recent years. I'd say probably 2014, 15. When I started university and was thinking, okay, getting into mechanical engineering a lot, passionate about plane, cars, and everything like that. Watches came along in the process from there, and the real triggering moment was when my brother started working at Tag Heuer.
Right.
Obviously, he got asking a few questions about, what do you think about this watch and this thing, and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure yourself, obviously, but also the viewers will know that as soon as you start getting interested in watches, it's a bit of a rabbit hole.
Yes.
You don't really end up getting a chance to get out of it, and that's how I got hooked. Obviously, I had a lot of time on my hands at university, so managed to really dive deep into the area and get interested in it.
That's amazing. The thing I was blown away by, when we how old were you when we first met? You were still in your teens, I would imagine.
Yeah,
right?
18, 19.
Right. And we met at the terrace of the Park Hyatt in Paris, and we just started to talk about watches. And I was like, wow, this guy really knows watches. And he has very discerning taste in terms of watches as well. What were the types of watchmaking that you initially appealed to you?
It's funny you ask, because obviously I'm interested in the scope of watchmaking itself. Certain brands obviously are quite preferred than others, but it first came with my first approach with watchmaking came with a disillusion.
Really?
Yeah, because when you don't really know about watches, you start getting interested in it. You think, okay, watchmaking is about that one watchmaker doing every single piece from start to finish, right. Machining everything himself. Obviously, you kind of realize that machines are involved in the process, and it's not only handmade, but still, all the pieces are made by machine, and then one watchmaker assembles everything.
Right.
As soon as you start getting into the industry, you realize that it's not actually the case at all, and there's only a few certain people that actually still do that today. Right. Even down to the one watchmaker, one watch phenomenon. Right. And very few houses do that. And that's really what interests me in watchmaking as a whole, rather than a mass production and things like that. So obviously, independence being all the rage at the moment, but even before independence were a thing, Crivia and the Bethune, Voudelainen, and things like that. People that really master the craft, not only master the craft, but also master the whole industrial side of things was super important for me. And that's what really got me into the deep ends of watchmaking.
You seem to have a particular passion for independent watchmaking, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I've always loved independent watchmaking because there's nothing more personal somehow than having a relationship with a person whose name is on the dial and seeing the exposure of their soul through the object that they've created. What is it for you?
High craftsmanship, more than independent watchmaking. You see, I mean, take examples. You've got big brands that use very traditional techniques to do their dials. Take Breguet as an example. They all do all of their dials using hand guilloché,
yes.
And that's a great representation of high craftsmanship. And that's why I really respect Breguet in most of what they do. Even though people consider that they've done poorly in the last few years, that's people's opinions. But the craftsmanship that goes behind it is really, really impressive, and they're very dedicated to that. Obviously, it's part of their whole structure behind it, but that I find super impressive. Vice versa, take Voudelaine as an example, the amount of finishing and details he put into his watches and the variety of different finishings that he can put on movements, dials, cases, and all things like that, brings a super interesting product to life. You know, it's not a sort of mass-produced, independent but mass-produced. It's really unique to every single piece he makes from start to finish. You know, you can essentially ask anything from him, he'll be able to do. He probably won't say yes, but he'll be able to do it. You know that industrially he's able to do basically anything, and if he finds the project interesting, he'll do it. You know, so that's really impressive.
Amazing. It's really cool that you mentioned Kari, because I have the great pleasure of embarking on my first Kari watch.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much. You know,
big moment.
It's huge, and actually, what's initially kind of almost intimidating is it is the richness of variety. You know, like I remember I was looking at a early 28. And it was, I think, a watch that had been sent to Besançon to be certified as a chronometer. But it was really interesting because it had on the base plate echoing motif, a guilloche motif, which I've never seen on a movement before. And I was like, that's beautiful. Yeah. The fact that it echoes the motif on the dial was absolutely thrilling. But I think I'm going to do this mechanism we just created, which I think I mentioned to you before, which was, so it's a dead seconds on demand.
Oh,
right!
Wow.
And so it goes from a normal central second. Well, I would imagine you would want a center second because you can see it, you know, sort of best with that huge seconds hand. And you can select whether it's dead seconds or not dead seconds, which I think is amazing. And
I'm looking forward to seeing that in person.
Me too, but no, I don't think it'll be so soon. But I'm so excited by that, and that's so thrilling to me. Let's talk about Vuitton. So you are the marketing and development director at Vuitton. You have the possibility to work with two absolute, you know, geniuses and legends in the industry, you know, which are Michel Navas and Enrico Babazzini, right? Tell me a little bit about that relationship and what you find so extraordinary about working with them.
They have incredible knowledge of the industry, obviously an incredible passion, and not knowledge of, by saying, end products or anything like that, but technical knowledge on anything they do. Obviously, they're geniuses in their own right, as you said. They went along the lines of basically any brand under the sun and have done amazing things when they were there. What I find particularly incredible working with them is just their constant creativity and their obviously constant passion in the process. So our way of working is actually quite simple, but turns out to, I believe, come out with probably incredible product in the next few years, just to say, okay, I have this specific idea. Just think about a way to rework the display of that complication to make it easier to look or more complicated or vice versa, and they'll, you know, spend 2 weeks. You won't necessarily see them, but then after the end of the 2 weeks, I'll be like, okay, this is our solution, and it's just incredible, you know. And every time it's like, oh, you know, movement's a bit too thick. How can you make it thinner? Like, you know, you can't make it thinner, blah blah blah. And then 2 weeks later, like, I found a way of doing it, and then it's going to be 2 millimeters thinner. You're like, okay, great. You know, it's always like that where you just plant the seed, wait for it to bloom, and then at the end of the day, you end up with a great result. And working with them is just incredible. You know, it's just brings a lot of savoir-faire together, and it's not only them. Obviously, that's the powerhouse of Fabrique du Temps.
Right.
It's really them associated with all the people behind them that allows these crazy ideas to come to light. You know, obviously Carpe Diem was a great example of that.
Incredible watch.
It's
congratulations on winning the.
Thank you. It was a great moment for us as well. I think it was great for the teams to really get that recognition. I mean, it was. Vuitton was not necessarily looked at by the watch community in a let's say, credible way. But thanks to that prix, I think it really brought things forward, and slowly people are opening their eyes to the craftsmanship that we're putting behind it, you know, and the savoir-faire.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned craftsmanship, but you talked before about quality as well. From what I understand, you're undertaking a fairly major evolution to Vuitton watches to have amongst the best quality of commercially offered watches in the world. Why is that important to you, and what shape will that take?
We're really going to focus deep down on the high watchmaking segment of our offer. Really try to rework these products in a better way and do them even better than we're doing it today, just to bring value to Fabrique du Temps as much as possible and essentially show people in and out of the industry the kind of amazing products that we release. Take the Spin Time as an example. We launched that in 09. It's an incredible product that people still don't really get just because of the simplicity of its display. It's a cube that turns a quarter turn every time the hour goes, and it's just essentially a jump hour. But it's not any jump hour. It's not a disc. It's actually a three-dimensional cube turning from one side to the other and precisely going from one position to the other. It's not an easy thing to do. It's certainly not an easy thing that was done by us, but still, we've evolved it over time. It went from bigger movement to a smaller movement with the Spin Time Air. And we'll keep refining that further, working on these, I think, iconic complications and keep building them over time and do that. So I think that's really the shape we want to go forward. And to go back to the independence talk, it's really a question of trying to bring the craftsmanship side of things behind it and value all the craftsmanship that we put behind our pieces generally. So really focus on the finishing of every single component, which we do actually today, but we don't necessarily speak about. It's like really value the finishing of every component, really value all the craftsmanship that goes behind a dial, value the artisans that work behind that, and really try to focus on that as much as possible.
It's funny that you said that you don't speak about it, because I think that's the entertaining juxtaposition or dichotomy that exists in Vuitton watches, is that you make extraordinary things that you almost never talk about, right? Like for example, that you made this incredible regatta chronograph, right? Which is one of the most groundbreaking movements that I'd ever seen, and then you kind of didn't really ever talk about it.
It's funny you say that, because I was talking to Michel and Rico about it even yesterday, and I was like, regatta chronograph, we should do it again, blah, 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 and they were like, oh my God, it was such a complicated movement. Please don't make us work on this anymore. It's got I don't know how many components, it's super complex, we had such a hard time making them, and it was just, and it's kind of those things, But at the end of the day, we're very lucky, because ever since we started in high watchmaking, it's been really successful. And obviously, we're not selling a lot of pieces. We're quite small in that, but we've always catered to our clients and focused on that as much as possible. And the pieces are selling well, So whichever crazy creation we might come up in the future, or we've come up in the past, I think our clients really enjoy that and are passionate about it.
One of my favorite cases is the Escale. And I love the integration of these lugs that representative of the element that you see in your trunks. Talk to me about the evolution or potential evolution for the Escale. What do you see there?
So Escale, we started in 2014 with the real-time watch, which obviously has all the hand-painted dial with the with all those flags that we still make today. It's evolved in a few ways, mostly with the Spin Time most recently that we launched this year, and previously we had also the minute repeater with the world time.
Really cool watch.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean it was.
You bring the home time.
Exactly. We can go into debate about that complication as well, where how it's more useful to actually chime your home time than your travel time. But whatever.
It's only useful.
Exactly. So, but the future for the Escale is actually going to really be, again, the same way we're going to build a collection around our high watchmaking segment, is bringing those movements and highly decorated, highly finished movements into the Escale case. Essentially more of a watchmaking approach to it. So really geared towards collectors and things like that. We want to put that collection forward in terms of the traditional sort of finishing.
That's exciting.
I know. I mean, it's fun. We have a lot of things to pick and choose from, and a lot of things to create as well. And that's an exciting few years coming ahead.
That's amazing, man. And hey, you're celebrating an anniversary for the Tambour. Tell us a little bit about that and what the future holds for that.
20 years, so it's not a lot in watchmaking. I often compare it to a human being. I know it's a bit abstract, but I'll get there. Essentially, when my small little theory is when you're getting up to 20, you have a pathway that's kind of defined for you. You need to go to school, you need to do this, that, get your diplomas, whatever. And then when you're 20, you actually have hard decisions to make. Either you go into higher education, you start working straight away, you start either your passion, you start up your career, and that's kind of a defining moment where you end up looking for minimum the next 20, but next 30, 40, 50 years after that. And these decisions will kind of define you. Take Vuitton watches into the equation. We've learned a lot in the last 20 years, successes, failures in the process. We went through all the different, regular pathways that the watchmaking industry made us go through, Poisson Genève, chronographs, obviously in-house movements and things like that. specific complications. We received our diplomas, the 2G PhD last year, and now we need to ask ourselves the questions: where do we want to go in the next 20 years? You know, and now where do we want to define our watchmaking strategy for the next 20? You know, and I think that's kind of a pivotal moment for us, where we think, okay, we've done that. What's worked? What's not worked? And then how we can move forward in the next 20 to get that thing going. You know.
That's incredible. I mean, it's a great analogy. I love the idea of the 2G PhD awards being the diplomas. Congratulations on your matriculation. That's awesome. And you're right. It's now the time to find your voice. I mean, just from a pragmatic perspective, though, the category of watch that's everyone's gone crazy for is the integrated bracelet sports watch, right? Tell me, is that something that's potentially on the cards, or?
We mostly want to focus on, again, the craftsmanship side of things. Obviously, integrated steel sports watch it would be silly for me to say that we're not looking at it, and it would be silly not to release a watch like that. Are we going to do it in the next 6 months or in the next 4 years? I don't know, but at least we're certainly looking at that segment. But I think, again, want to focus on is valuing our high craftsmanship. You've seen Fabrique du Temps many times. Obviously, our dial making techniques are top notch and very handicrafted. Same thing with the movements. We would do all the finishing by hand at the Fabrique du Temps. We make all our movements in the house. I mean, it's all of that thing we need to talk about. Continue refining that and putting it forward, and that's what we're going to put in front as much as possible. We're really wanting to bring more savoir-faire in the Fabrique du Temps and bring that to the watches at the end of the day.
Awesome, man. So, the next thing I want to talk to you about is, I know, a project that's incredibly close to your heart.
Yes.
Actually, I'm super excited by it as well. You are going to helm the, I guess, relaunch of one of the most mythical names in independent watchmaking, Daniel Roth.
Yes.
Tell me what's going on.
I brought a piece in my pocket today, actually. I thought it was quite funny to show you that. This is not the piece we're going to launch. Obviously, it's a piece that was made 20 plus years ago.
Right.
This one is in steel specifically,
Wow.
and it's based on the original tourbillon that they made.
Yes.
I'm super proud to be able to help in the relaunch of that brand. I think it's a very interesting show, again, of high craftsmanship and of high watchmaking. For that brand specifically, we want to house it at La Fabrique du Temps and house the savoir-faire there to really bring forward, obviously hand guilloché, handmade finishing on bridges and plates, and all of the high watchmaking techniques that you'd expect from a high watchmaking brand, and really make it in the true watchmaking art. So the goal is really to bring that forward and transform La Fabrique du Temps into a specifically Louis Vuitton area, into an academy of high horology. And then bringing Daniel Roth in is going to be interesting for us. Obviously, it's a big challenge because we're, like many in the industry, very well ordered in terms of our watches at LV. But I think we can integrate more savoir-faire thanks to this brand as well, and really try to focus on the way the brand was made in the early days when Daniel Roth was there, and really focus on the specific details of the movement, the things that people don't necessarily see, even the client doesn't necessarily see, just for when a watchmaker opens the watch up, looks it up and says, okay, wow, so these guys looked at this specific screw, this specific pivot, and finished it in that specific way. How the hell did they do that, first of all? And secondly, why the hell did they do that? It cost them three or four times more money,
That's awesome.
And that's what we really want to put forward. It's not, again, a numbers game. We don't need it to make ends meet with La Fabrique du Temps, but we really want to put it forward to put a spotlight on high watchmaking, put a spotlight in the sort of very high end of the market, and also build our knowledge in this area. We're not we've obviously have the Poisson de Genève already, which brings us a lot of savoir-faire, a lot of amazing savoir-faire, I feel. Right. But we still have a lot to learn, like everyone, and we'll keep building on that.
Dude, that's going to be like the perfect showcase for high finishing. I mean, and it's also, the timing is perfect as well, because the zeitgeist of the moment is Daniel Roth. I mean, it's if you look at the vintage pieces, they've escalated in value like tremendously, and everyone, every kind of vintage guy right now is kind of focused on these as well. So it's, I mean, had you been thinking about this for some time, or?
Yeah, it's been a thought of mine, obviously, for the last year since I've been taking care of LV. Obviously, there was a lot of things to do at LV before that could be an option. But now that we've structured Louis Vuitton in such a way that we can bring new people in. That's the way that's when we decided to say, okay, you know, it's an interesting project. We can work on it, and we'll do that. And again, the goal for us is not necessarily, you see, capture the zeitgeist. I agree with you. It's a great moment to be there, but it's not necessarily the way we want to approach it.
Right.
We, before all, not want to cut any corners.
Right.
In the movement finishing, in the movement construction, in the dial finishing, in the hand finishing, all of that thing, and hand making and all of the processes going for that. We'll want to mark a certain rupture compared to the pieces of the past, just to show that it's a new era without obviously revolutionizing anything. We'll really want to focus on what the maximum we can do with the abilities we have today, and we'll continue working on that for every piece we'll make in the future as well. You know, and that will benefit LV obviously, because the pushing the limits with Daniel Roth will allow LV to also have access to those limits. But in the process, you know, we'll have a few nice watches to show.
That's actually really incredible, and honestly, as beautiful as those original watches are, I now get it. You're going to massively improve on even the very excellent finish that was done there.
I mean, it's not about improving. We've looked deeply into the movements of the existing Daniel Roth watches, and they're impeccable. Right. But it's more about, you know, keeping that tradition alive and really not cutting any corners like he did back in the day.
Okay.
Really,
understood.
You know, it's really putting things forward in that way. Which, I mean, again, will benefit everybody. The plan is not to make hundreds of thousands of watches, and not nearly like that. You know, I don't think we'll ever go over 500 to 600 watches a year.
Wow. Okay.
If everything goes correctly, but you know, it's small production, you know, small numbers, but true representation of what can we do in high craftsmanship.
Amazing, Jean. Thank you very much. Congratulations
Thank you so much.
on this, and I can't wait to see what the future holds, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
See you soon.